Hi there, welcome to New City Church. I'm Cami. Our heartbeat is simple. Here we are learning to live the ways of Jesus so our neighbors encounter the name of Jesus. If you're exploring faith or looking for a church home, you're in the right place. Here you'll find sermons and practical teaching to help you follow Jesus, not just on Sunday, but on your street, with your family, and in your everyday rhythms. Let's jump in.
His anxiety was hard to shake. Mind racing, he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan as it went around and around and around. The children had gone to bed hours ago. The family business was booming. Third quarter record sales. The international partnerships and clients and their recent new contract was a massive success. His real estate was worth 10 times what it was 10 years ago when he purchased it. He was in many ways, him and his family, the envy of all of their friends and their family that lived out of state. And yet still fear crept in as sleep escaped him. His success had come a little bit easier than he would have liked to admit. And so now he wonders if it could all be taken from him just as easily. He adored his children and his wife adored him. This was not a story of a man who neglected his family for the sake of shareholders. His children were incredible. The siblings got along so well, better than him and his siblings ever got along. They loved and cared for each other, little spats here and there. But they were great kids. He did worry a little bit about their faith. Him and his wife worried once they left the house what would become of it. He'd worried that if their wealth had spoiled his children a little bit too much as they flew the coop. But they were prayed for regularly, and he hoped that in forging their own way, they would not forget the God of their childhood. He knew that a move away from home was to build a new life, and yet he himself had managed to keep the God of his childhood and his eyes fixed on the one whom he worshiped. Eyes were tired, too tired to fall asleep. How many employees and their families, how many pensions relied on him? His business sustained the region. How hard would the region be hit if there was a few poor decisions in a row here or there, or if his luck ran out or shifted, or if the new international contract they had just signed fell through? What if all that he had dreamed and worked for came to nothing? His eyes finally gave up the fight. Sleep descended on him. The last thoughts that held him before he made it to sleep that night was that if everything failed, if the business failed, if the contracts fell through, if the wealth was gone, if everything he had built burned to the ground, he would still have his family, he would still have his wife, he would still have his children, he would still have those closest to him in his moment of need. And they had a date night planned for Saturday that he was looking forward to, and his oldest son's birthday was next Thursday. Yeah, he would be okay as long as he had them. A week more of anxious sleep went by, and he entered once again into his morning routine. 2 cups of coffee, a conversation with his wife, and a 10-minute commute to work. He was ready for this workday to be over, because at the end of the day, he would be going off to his son's birthday party, and this was what he was looking forward to all week. He was in the middle of reading a contract, waiting for the minutes and the hours of this workday to run out, and one of his managers comes in, bursts in his office, and lets him know this. The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabians fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people. They are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. In one day, Job lost everything. Every herd, every flock, all 10 of his children. The entirety of his wealth and his offspring were gone in 24 hours. Like sand slipping through his hand. And at the end of this day, Job blessed the name of the Lord, and he did not sin. And we are faced with the question here this morning, and we are faced with the question every time we look at the book of Job. How in the world does Job have faith in the face of unthinkable loss? Truly unthinkable loss. Loss that many of us can't even imagine. And this is an important question because one day everyone in this room, if you haven't already, will face what? Unthinkable loss, if it hasn't happened already. See, my best guess to answer this question is this: Job has true faith. Job has true faith. That's the short answer, but what is true faith? True faith is this. True faith is trust in God's character, not in the understanding of our circumstances. It is trust in God's character, not in the understanding of the circumstances we are given. Now, let's just take a moment to John 6 this. And like the early disciples, the earliest disciples of Jesus, we should all say, this is a hard teaching. Who can learn this? Who can understand this? This is tough. After all, we are people who are constantly looking for an explanation for our suffering and the unjust things in our world. We want to make sense of them, and we want to understand them. We want them to make sense in a coherent system that we can understand. But here's the beauty of the book of Job. It doesn't give us the answers. It doesn't give us the answers we want. It gives us the God we need. You read through the entirety of the book of Job, and him and his friends and his wife are all wrestling with, why did this happen to you, Job? And you get to the end of the book, and you don't get an answer. You think, what in the world? How could you leave us on such a cliffhanger? You should have wrapped that up. Go ahead and read ahead this week. You will not find an answer for why God allowed these horrible things to happen to Job, even though Job and his friends search and look everywhere. You will find, however, a personal God who is not silent in our suffering or in our complaint. And not only this, but the book of Job foreshadows and points us to God himself suffering on our behalf so that our circumstances, whatever they are ultimately not fatal or final. See, the ultimate sufferer is actually one greater than Job, even though Job was really good at it. And there's a foreshadowing to one who suffers on our behalf. So let's dig in. I want to point out a couple really important things in the first couple chapters of Job that hopefully will lead us to learn how can we have faith in the midst of unthinkable loss. This is a question that we'll all have to answer eventually. True and tested faith. So here's a little bit of context. Job 1, 1 through 2. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And the man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. So Job is a book that is most likely written about 600 to 800 years before the birth of Jesus. But the story of Job is actually, odds are, much older than that. This was a story that was passed down orally, through oral memorized tradition for probably hundreds of years, and then finally written down in a way that could be preserved. The author of Job is either one of two things, is either a Gentile or a Jewish person that is living very far away from Jerusalem, because the Hebrew in the book of Job resembles nothing of the Hebrew that was in and around Jerusalem at the time. And Job himself is a Gentile who worships Yahweh, the God of Israel. And we aren't told how that moment happens of him putting his faith in Yahweh, but here we are. And Job has been immensely blessed, and although he is not perfect, he is someone to be admired. He is someone to be emulated. He fears God, he turns away from evil, and he's been blessed abundantly. Now, a couple things I want to name here in the context. First one is this: obedience is blessed. Obedience is blessed. Now, I know in our theological camp, in our tradition of New City Church, we have a very strong allergy to the crap that is the prosperity gospel. Name it and claim it, health and wealth. If I sow a seed of my finances, or if I'm faithful, then God will bless me abundantly. And eventually you have a pastor on a stage asking for fundraising for a private jet. Okay? Hate to break it to you, I don't have a PJ. So we have a very strong allergy to that. But let's not go so far to the other side of the spectrum in which we end up in a place where all we believe that's due to us is suffering. Obedience and faithfulness doesn't always buy you more suffering. Sometimes it buys you favor and blessing. Now, that blessing has two offshoots. One, you're blessed because in your obedience, you are spared or saved from the consequences of disobedience. So some of it is just plain instantaneously in the moment. You were faithful, you obeyed to love your family faithfully, or you obeyed to steward your finances faithfully, or you obeyed to go share the gospel with that coworker in the cubicle next to you because the Spirit's been nagging you for the last 6 months. You were faithful in that, and so you're spared from the consequences of regret and shame and guilt and having to repent, okay? But then also there's the secondary blessing of favor, of supernatural blessing in your life where God opens doors and God moves and God blesses you. And maybe it's not to the scale that you've dreamed of, but there is blessing nonetheless. Number 2 here, Gentiles were always a part of the plan. It's not like we get to the New Testament in Jesus and then God turns on the faucet for allowing Gentiles to come to saving faith. Gentiles were always a part of the plan. Whether it was Nineveh, whether it was Job, whether it's the story of Ruth, Gentiles were always being folded in and engrafted to the covenant people, even in the Old Testament. So don't posit or position the God of the Old Testament against the God of the New Testament. Same God, same heart for lost people, Gentiles too. Now let's fast forward through 1:6 through 12. Satan approaches God. And God says, where you been? And Satan says, well, I've been roaming the earth, causing all sorts of havoc. And God says, well, yeah, but you haven't got Job. Haven't messed with Job, have you? He's faithful. He turns away from evil. He's upright. Not perfect, but there's no one else like Job in all the earth. It's kind of the John the Baptist statement of like, there's no one greater that's been born of man. He's saying, Job's my guy. And Satan says, well, yeah, he's faithful because he's super blessed. Look at him. He's got 7,000 cattle. He's got 10 children. He's the richest dude in the East. Of course, he's going to be faithful. Look at all this blessing. And God says, no, he'll still be faithful, even if all that's taken. So Satan says, okay. But God gives him a parameter. He says, you can touch anything that he has, but you can't actually harm or touch him. So you can take his stuff, but you can't afflict him. And we'll see how this plays out. And then this calamity strikes Job. Now here's the initial response of Job after the calamity, Job 1:20. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. Now, in the ancient Near East context, tearing your robe and shaving your head, it was not a fashion statement. It was a sign of lament. It was a sign of mourning. It's like how we wear all black maybe to a funeral. It is to show I am in a moment of grief. And here's what this teaches us, a beautiful lesson. A hard lesson, but a beautiful lesson. Grief and suffering are not mutually exclusive from our worship. It's not either or. It's both and. It's not, okay, I'll worship now and then I'll have grief later. Or I'm suffering now, when the suffering's over, then I'll worship. Your worship and your suffering are often thrown in a blender, and that's what we have at the same time. And sometimes our definition of worship is way too narrow. For some of us, we think it's an hour on a Sunday morning. For other of us, it's even more narrow. It's the 4 songs in the hour on Sunday morning. And then you come with 10% of the energy that you bring to the football game. And you think that's worship. That's the most boring, lame thing I've ever heard of. No, worship is anything that draws us to a position of appreciation and gratitude of God. So it's enjoying the good gifts He's given us, it's pursuing the good mission He's given us, but it's also crying out in a moment of pain, squealing in a moment of pain, and saying, though you slay me, I know you're still for me. I know you're still here. There is even blessing, and there is even presence, and then there is either empathy in this moment of my sharp pain. Here's the second thing we're taught in this. Everything we have in this life is a loaner. Everything you have is a loaner. Your cars are loaners, your house is a loaner, the clothes you wear, it's a loaner, that your job that you have, the time that you have, it's all on loan. It's all a loaner. Several years ago, Haley and I, we were in Italy and we rented a car, and I chose the cheapest, smallest Fiat that you could imagine, straight clown car, where you're like piling 4 people in, you're like, how are the people going to fit in there? Well, when we got to the little car dealer thing, they were all out of the tiny clown car Fiats that we were going to pile everyone into for vacation, and they said, well, we've got this French sports car in the back lot, you can have that because that's all we have left. Now, I had 3 thoughts immediately. Thought number 1, we're going to get mugged. I cannot be driving that around some of the poor parts of southern Italy because we will get robbed. Number 2, how am I going to park this thing? Because this is like an extended 4-door sedan, I mean, sporty. And the streets in Italy are brutal. I was like, I'm going to park this thing off a cliff. Or we're going to leave with 4 parking tickets, which we did. We tried to pay them. I don't know. I don't know if I can ever go back to Italy. There's probably an Interpol out for me. The third thought was, this is awesome. I'm going to let this thing rip down the Amalfi Coast. And it's going to be the closest thing I've ever experienced to being in a Bond film. And so we had it, and it was great. And Italian drivers, they're aggressive. At first, I was like, why are you guys so mean to me? My feelings are hurt. By the end, I was like honking at mothers pushing their stroller across the street. Get out of my way. That's a true story. I'm not making that up. You can ask Haley. It was a roundabout. There wasn't even a pedestrian crossing. Anyway. But then the trip was over and I had to return it. And in the moment of return, there was no sense of, this is unjust. This is unfair. Why are you taking this from me? No, I deserve to keep this. Why? Because it was a loaner. We understand this with other aspects, but when it comes to our faith, when anything circumstantially is taken from us, God's unjust. Life's unfair, and I'm Job. And I'm just out here suffering, and I have nothing good in my life. And we throw ourselves a little pity party, don't we? But it's all a loaner. Everything's on loan. And here's the even worse part about this. In the end, there's only one way to know that you have true faith, and it's suffering. You will not know if you have real faith until you suffer. In its varying degrees, and it's packaged in varying ways. But only when you come out on the other side of a trial will you for the first time realize, oh my goodness, this faith is real. See, when Satan approaches God and says, yeah, well, it's because he's got all this nice stuff. That's the only reason he's faithful. Satan in that moment is right and wrong at the same time. He's wrong because he's underestimated Job. But he is right in that a lot of people, when the nice stuff is taken, or when some trial or calamity happens, or relationally there's some falling out, or maybe there was something you thought to be true that ends up to be maybe less confident that it's true, then it all unravels. And in the crucible, it is revealed, it's not true faith. You did only have faith because you had the nice stuff. And the moment the nice stuff was taken, it's gone. So Satan was right about a lot of people, but he underestimated Job. He was not right about Job. Now let's fast forward through 2:1 through 8. Satan goes back to God, and he says, yeah, he hasn't cursed you yet, but that's because he himself is still okay. Despite all the wealth, and despite all his offspring being taken, which is insane, he has his health. He has his wife. He's still clinging on to some stuff that you've blessed him with. And God says, okay, you can afflict his body. You can't take his life, but you can afflict his body. So Satan goes down and he afflicts him with sores from his bottom of his feet to the crown of his head. And Job finds himself sitting in ash with torn clothes, scabbed up, bald head, mourning and lamenting in his house with a small piece of pottery, broken pottery, trying to itch at the wounds. If you've ever had any kind of ailment or anything that itches, it's the worst, right? Maybe when you were a kid, you had a cast, and 3 weeks in, you got a hanger, and you're itching that thing. That's Job. He's got his little piece of pottery, scraping the wounds. Can't even move. And in this moment, Job's wife rebukes him. She says this, then the wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Men, do not say that. Don't you dare take this out of context and go home and say, you speak as the foolish women speak. Don't you do that. Context is king. I'll know. I have a spidey sense for this. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. So Job's wife is essentially asking, and let's be fair to Job's wife, she's just lost 10 children. And any form of future financial security. She's down bad. And now her husband can't even do a single chore around the house because he's scraping himself with a broken piece of pottery on the ground. It's bleak. But she needs this situation to make sense. So she said, God has clearly cursed you. Curse him back. Eye for an eye, ear for an ear. Job, make sense of this. Stop worshiping, stop praising, stop blessing the name of Yahweh when he has cursed you. You do not return curse with blessing, return it with curse. And then we can logically make sense of our suffering in this moment. We can understand our circumstance. Because we will react to our circumstance accordingly, proportionally, and then everything will be logical and rational. But here's the problem. Job remembers. He remembers the days where there were 7,000 sheep. And he remembers the laughter of his children. And he remembers the birthday parties. And he remembers when they wanted for nothing. And he remembers where he could roll over at night and sleep without his sores keeping him awake all night. He remembers the goodness of God and everything that was a blessing. And his memory of God's character in his life is too strong to overcome. And he will not curse God. And so in the circumstance, what is larger than the circumstance? God's character. That's what's under the microscope, not his suffering. But when we're suffering, it's easy, right? To zoom in on the suffering. We go from telescope to microscope. But the calling is, remember your telescope. Bring it along with you and remember, there is this big and awesome and good God that even in allowing suffering is present there with you. Don't get trapped in the microscope. And here's what ultimately Job knows. I think he knows this better than me. I think he knows this better than a lot of us in this room. One day I hope to learn this truly. And Job knows this. We are born looking like our parents. We die looking like our decisions. We are born looking like our parents. Naked into this world we come. And we die looking like our decisions. And so even in this moment, Job is raging against the temptation to unfaithfulness by saying, even as I'm scraping with this piece of pottery, I'm going to end well. I'm going to finish this race well. And I still have my wife beside me, even though we're in a conflict point right now. My life has not been taken from me, and my memory of the faithfulness of God is too strong. I've run the race to this point. I've got 100 yards to the finish. I'm not going to stop now. Haley, my wife, she works in a hospital setting. She sees this all the time. There are people with immense suffering, pain I can't imagine, who die surrounded by the ones they love, blessing the name of the Lord and anticipating the arms of Jesus. There are also people that she serves in a hospital setting that die completely alone, cursing everyone around them and the God who created them with their last breath. And they rage in the last moments. This is not just Job, y'all. This is us. So then we have to ask the question, what if I have cursed God? What if I failed? What if I didn't have the true faith that Job had? What if I'm a lesser believer? Can I come back from that? Yeah, the Bible is full of people that have come back. They have had comeback stories. From cursing God and despising the calling on their lives to blessing God. The Bible is full of comeback story after comeback story after comeback story. You can come back from cursing God. It's not too late. If you have breath in your lungs this morning, it's not too late. But you're going to have to give two things up forever. Two things, friends. You're going to have to give them up forever. One, your religiousness. Any sense in you of, if I do good and act right and am obedient, I am then not subjected to any kind of pain and suffering. One obedience equals one blessing. And my righteousness surpasses those sinners over there. And how do those sinners over there, how are they blessed with nice stuff? And me, the faithful Job sufferer over here, I get suffering. The cancer diagnosis is on my family. Or my spouse lost that job. And so religiousness, the faith of the Pharisees tells us that our obedience or lack of obedience is a direct one-for-one to the blessing or curse that we receive in our lives. And Jesus explicitly warns us against this. He says it rains on the righteous and the wicked, and sometimes the wicked prosper, but they won't forever. And sometimes the righteous suffer, but they won't forever. And those roles will be reversed in the upside-down kingdom one day. Don't you forget it. And so we have to leave our religiousness at the door. We have to abandon our sense of entitlement of, I did a couple obedient things, and now things better go really well for me. I mean, look at this sacrifice I'm making, Lord. Number 2, your cynicism. You're going to have to give up your cynicism forever. That says, well, it doesn't really matter what I do. Crap happens. It happens to everyone. We all just suffer. We're the objects of cosmic chance, and here we are, and the universe punches us in the face time and time again, and there's really nothing I can do here. I'm out of control, hands off the wheel. The universe just happens to me. We have to give that up too. Because in our testing, in the trial, in the moments where suffering is real, what we do in those moments matters. Because we can curse God and die, or we can worship. Now here's what we'll end with. How does Job foreshadow Jesus? Well, Job in many ways is incredible. He inspires us to have true faith in the midst of suffering. But here's the thing about Job. He can be an example for us, but he can't actually take away our suffering. Nothing Job did can take away your suffering. He can be an example for you to live by, but he could not take away your suffering or your pain or give your soul the rest it needs. Jesus not only is the perfect example, but he can also deal with your suffering. On the cross, he obliterates the thing that would have us suffer eternally forever. Also this, as bad as Job had it, Satan was not allowed to kill him. And yet Jesus is killed at the hands of sinners and evil men. What Isaac is spared from, what Job is spared from, God does not spare his only son from. So there is one true and greater than Job. Also, suffering is allowed to the point at which it ruins the plan of the enemy. So we might question, Lord, what are you doing in Job? Sure, Satan has to come and grovel to you for permission. You're clearly in charge of the show here. Why don't you just tell Satan to beat it? But the Lord allows suffering. A lot of suffering is mystery, but I think I can confidently say this. Suffering is allowed to the point in which it foils the plans of the enemy. C.S. Lewis puts it like this: the Lord allows Satan enough rope to hang himself. So in Job, he allows the suffering to the point of Satan realizing, oh crap, I've got this one wrong, and this is foiled. He allows his only son to be killed at the hands of sinners and evil men 2,000 years ago. And for a brief moment, Satan thinks he's got it. He thinks he's got the W wrapped up. Jesus is in the tomb. Jesus is in the grave. His disciples are scattered everywhere like cowards on a hillside. It's over. The night, the darkness of night is during day. I have finally bested the Lord. Yeah, he got me with Job, but I got him with Jesus. And we know how the story ends. 3 days later, Satan got enough rope to hang himself with. So you can have faith like Job. Here's the thing about Job. We look at Job and we're like, oh my goodness, Job, that's insane. We'll never be like Job. You can have faith like Job. You can. There's a horrible privilege as a pastor that for some of you, I have been present in some of the most intimate moments of your life. And I know for a fact that some of you have the faith of Job, and I've seen it. Some of you sitting here this morning have suffered to the point of absolute breakdown. And in that moment, with your jar of clay, you worshiped. And I saw it in you. It's possible. And it's not because there's no one like you in all the earth. It's not because you're the greatest in the East. It's not because your circumstances have all aligned to 7,000 cattle on the hill. It's because the object of your faith is the ultimate sufferer. And the ultimate sufferer is not Job. It is Jesus of Nazareth, who not only tells us how to navigate our suffering, but eventually, in the fulfillment of all things, takes that suffering away from us. Eventually, we'll see that Job had everything, nearly everything, restored to him. How much more will we taste restoration in the new heavens and the new earth? Let's pray.
Thanks for joining us at New City Church, where we're learning to live the ways of Jesus so our neighbors encounter the name of Jesus. If today's message encouraged you, hit subscribe and share it with a friend or neighbor. We'll see you next week.